The following program is part of Cable in the Classroom, a free service of the cable communications industry and your local cable company.
What's up, class? Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects. Me. Well, not actually me, but you know, people. Now, in case you haven't looked around lately, there's a whole bunch of us on the planet. In fact, there's over 6 billion of us on 7 different continents in over 180 different countries speaking thousands of different languages. Kind of amazing we have anything to say to each other at all, huh? Funny thing is, though, for all our differences, no matter where you go or who you talk to, we all live under the same sky, which means 6 billion very different people all have one very common interest every single day: the weather. Think about it for a moment. The weather has a huge effect on what we do, what we eat, what we wear, where we live. In other words, everything. Now, the weather actually has a long history of affecting humans. Over the centuries, we've moved to every corner of the world, and a lot of that moving around was due to the weather. You know, chasing herds of animals to survive, running from ice ages, little things like that. Well, the flip side to all this is, with so many of us on the planet, now we have an effect on the weather. Go figure. But let's start at the very beginning and hook up with the gang who's going to be taking a look at the rocky relationship between people and weather.
New York City. Now this place is people central, so there's no place better to talk about animals. Well, the human animal, to be exact.
Of all the species on the planet, we're one of the biggest success stories. Mother Nature's thrown a lot our way, but so far, we've managed to survive disease, famine, drought, even an ice age or two. And throughout it all, we've managed to evolve and adapt to a constantly changing world.
The weather has a long history of influence on our species, and a lot of scientists believe that early humans migrated from the East African Plateau. It took thousands and thousands of years, but since then, humans have moved all over the planet, and each time, we had to adjust to a different climate. From the sub-freezing temperatures of the Siberian tundra to the warm tropics of the Amazon rainforest, you name it. There aren't many places on the planet we can't live. The interesting thing is, even though we live in all kinds of climates, the range of temperatures in which humans can survive is actually pretty narrow. And the fact is, we really don't do well in extreme temperatures at all.
Okay, time for a quick biology lesson. We're here at Zoo Atlanta with Cindy and Jennifer and some of their friends to get the lowdown on how to stay warm when it's cool and cool when it's hot. So, how do these guys do it?
Well, Sarah, we are here with Cortez the macaw, Bud the iguana, and Rocky the chinchilla, and they regulate their temperatures differently. Rocky and Cortez are warm-blooded animals, which means that they regulate their temperatures in 2 different ways. One is just by muscle movement, and the other is by burning fat and carbohydrates, and that's called endothermic. Now, Bud here is completely different. He's a cold-blooded animal, which means that his body temperature is regulated by the outside environment. But that doesn't mean to say that he doesn't regulate his own temperature. If it's really hot out, he's gonna go find a really nice, cool, shady spot. If it's really cold out, he's gonna go find a really nice, sunny, warm rock to lay on. And that's called ectothermic. And that's the main difference between warm and cold-blooded animals.
All right, there you have it. And who could argue with a face like that?
See, there are benefits of being endothermic.
It takes fuel to generate heat, and they've got great fuel here in New York. In warmer weather, we have other ways of keeping the body going.
The human body is equipped with its very own high-tech air conditioning system. Sweat. It's what keeps our temperature down. The average person has between 1.5 and 3 million sweat glands, and on a hot day, they're all in use. Rapid salt and water loss can lead to heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and even heat stroke, which is when your entire body completely shuts down. Not good, because that can be fatal. So, on a hot day, wear lightweight, loose-fitting clothing and drink plenty of water. Got it? Good.
We warm-blooded animals need to take precautions when we're going to be in the cold or the heat. But warm or cold, we have to be careful how much sun we get. You know you can get a sunburn at the beach, but it's just as easy to get burned while snow skiing in the mountains. And a little sun is nice, but too much can ruin a lot more than your day.
Sun is important. I mean, we all know that people don't do well if they're not getting enough sun. We need sun for just nutrition because it makes vitamin D in our body. People who don't get enough sun get depressed. If you're not smart about getting sun, there's some long-term as well as short-term consequences that you won't like. The short-term consequences is there's a possibility of getting burned, and that's no fun. I mean, it hurts and your skin peels, and that's not a really fun thing to go through. The long-term consequences, what we're most concerned about is skin cancer. What we're trying to say is just to be really smart about it. So you want to use sunscreen, and we recommend on a daily basis, and make it like, part of your morning routine. You brush your teeth, you comb your hair, you put on your sunscreen. And you just want to be smart about when you go out. I mean, so you don't really want to go play a big, long game of tennis like at noon when the sun is directly over your head. So we do need to be aware of the sun, not just during the summertime and not when it's full, bright, sunny day outside, but we also have to worry about it during cloudy days as well as when we're in environments when we don't think about the sun. The reason why is that it's not just the one-time blast of sun that's going to damage your skin, it's the cumulative amount of sun. And so if you're going to get a little bit of sun, when it's a cloudy day, it still counts. And so you want to protect yourself against that. The other thing is that if you're in an environment, like a cold environment when you're in the snow, you may not think about the sun, but it's actually worse because the white snow will reflect off the sunlight and you can get actually a lot more sun than you would expect. We just want you to be smart, and so we want you to have a healthy, happy life now and also in the future.
If you're a human being, and I think most of you fall into that category, the three most basic things that you need are food, clothing, and shelter. Now, that may not sound like the ingredients for a great Friday night out, but trust me, without those three things, nothing else is going to matter. Now, guess which one of our basic needs isn't affected by weather? Too late. Besides, it's a trick question. They all are. Those of you that answer correctly can go to the head of the class. Thank you very much.
Because we grow most of the food we eat, the weather has always played a major part in determining what we eat, when we eat it, and sometimes whether we eat at all. Bad weather could mean a bad harvest, and a bad harvest means higher food prices, disappearing food supplies, and in some parts of the world, empty stomachs. We wear clothes for lots of different reasons, and New York City here is the fashion capital of the world. All you have to do is check out the latest designs to see how different those reasons are.
As we look through the history of humanity, we find there are many groups of people who've been naked, but no one who's been unadorned. So, for example, people might be decorated with body paint or with jewelry and other forms of adornment. That said, we do know that in cold climates, way back to the Neolithic, people were wearing skins to keep warm. And in rainy climates, people were using leaves to cover their head. If we look at world geography, we tend to find that people in northern climates often use animal skins, and the clothing is based on the shape of the animal skin. And they may take skins and turn them into leggings or trousers that fit over the form of the body, or parkas that cover the arms and the head. In warmer climates, when people invented agriculture early in prehistory, then they were able to weave cloth out of vegetable materials instead of having to rely on wild plants. In modern society, though, people have much greater freedom to choose what they want to wear. And their clothes might instead say things like, I'm interested in this kind of music, or my friends and I identify ourselves as being sort of proto-hippies, and so we dress this way because that says something about our own personal enthusiasms.
So people are warm-blooded animals, which means we're not naturally adapted to extreme weather, hot or cold. In fact, if you weren't wearing any clothes, you'd start to shiver when the temperature got below 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and you'd start sweating when it got over 80. So let's check in with Brandon, who thankfully does have some clothes on. He's doing a little research on how the human body adapts to cold climates.
Hi, it's me, Brandon, here to tell you that the human body does not adapt to cold climates. Can I go home now?
Brandon.
Seems to me like I could explain this without being frozen.
It's not my fault. It's in the script.
Oh, all right. The fact is, the human body really doesn't adapt to cold climates. And keeping warm in cold weather is really important if you like that staying alive thing. We humans have a low tolerance to the cold, and without protective clothing on, we eventually lose our ability to maintain our core temperature of about 98 degrees Fahrenheit. This condition is called hypothermia, and it can be deadly. Hypothermia becomes a real concern when wind and wet clothing are added to the equation. The key to keeping warm is to dress properly, and that means living by these three important words. Dress in layers. Or if you don't like those, how about get Brandon out? Maybe those will work. Help?
Hi, I'm Glenn Crowther. When you go outdoors for any length of time, it's important to keep this in mind. Water is the enemy. Water can get to you from the outside, so you need a waterproof, breathable shell. But water can also get you from the inside. You see, we're warm-blooded animals, and we give off an awful lot of moisture. So let's talk about the right layering system. This person has it just about right. You see, this person is dressed in layers, and there are three main layers. There's the wicking layer, there's the insulation layer, and there's the shell layer. The wicking layer is made of some type of synthetic material, not cotton, because cotton holds water. Water next to the skin helps you to cool down very quickly, and you don't want that when you're going to be outside in the cold. The next layer is the insulation layer. In some conditions, you do want a lot of layers. For instance, if it's going to be really cold outside, this helps to hold the warmth next to your skin. Fleece or a windstopper garment is great for that insulation layer. Finally, you have your shell layer. A waterproof, breathable product, hopefully, because you want something to be waterproof and keep the rain out, and you want something to be breathable so that the moisture from your bodies can get out. So now that you've dressed in layers, don't forget your hands and your feet and your head. Most of the heat we lose through our heads, so if you're cold, like Mama said, wear a hat. So that's it. Dress in layers, keep your hands and feet covered, and keep something on your head. It's all about staying outdoors longer and being more comfortable.
A shelter is a place that gives you protection from the elements, and even early humans knew all too well the importance of keeping a roof over your head. Fortunately, we've come a long way since huts were made out of bones.
Well, humans are really fragile creatures, and so we needed to have something that protected us, and it was architecture, and that was the beginning of civilization, and the creating of cities, gathering us together, and protecting us from all sorts of forces, but especially from weather. Generally, you build with materials that are close at hand, and then you build in order to accommodate the weather, so that you want to have a cool house, you may want to have airflow enhanced through your home, or you may want to have the heat transmit very slowly into your house. You have very thick walls, as you would in a more desert climate like New Mexico or Arizona. Spain, some of those areas where you have very massive walls with coverings of stucco, and so you're protected from rain, but you're also more protected from the heat. One of the most prominent elements within any building design is its roof. And the roof form is so characteristic of different cultures that you could actually see a building's roof and pretty much place it in different parts of the world. So we have roofs that are very tall and steep pitches that would be helpful mostly to get rid of not just rain, but the winter condition of snow. Because if you have a flat surface and it snows a great deal, it's an enormous amount of weight that builds up, and it can actually cause building collapse. One movement in modern architecture is to accommodate the weather and use it to create buildings that are more responsive. And this will create cost savings so that we will actually create buildings that are in harmony with the hot weather or the cold weather. We will take breezes into our buildings, and we will create architecture that's really more similar to our historic architecture than some of our more recent modern buildings have been.
Okay, so you probably get the idea by now that weather plays a major role in the lives of billions of people every day. And with billions of people all over the planet, we've actually started to return the favor, and not always in a good way. People have been trying for years to control the weather for all kinds of good reasons. But so far, it seems we've had the greatest impact on the atmosphere and the weather when we weren't really thinking about it at all.
Ancient dances, prayers, and rituals have all been tried to influence the weather. The weather, however, hasn't cooperated much. After World War II, people started seeding clouds with dry ice and silver iodide to make it rain when it otherwise wouldn't. This seems to work more often, but we're still a long way from controlling the skies. Our deliberate attempts at influencing the weather have met with pretty mixed results. However, there is some indication we're changing the weather accidentally, and not exactly in a good way. They say it's a small world, and whether that's true or not, there's one thing for certain: it's not getting any bigger. The population, however, is. We have so many people living so close together in our cities that we've actually become a force of nature, whether we intended to or not.
It's becoming more and more obvious as the population continues to explode that humans are actually impacting weather and climate. Now, on the global scale, it's actually a little bit cloudy. We do know that the ozone concentrations up in the stratosphere have been reducing for 20 or 30 years. The good news is, through policy and reduction in those emissions, we're actually seeing the ozone levels plateauing, so they're not falling anymore. That's great news. However, as it relates to increasing global temperatures, that's a very, very complicated issue, mainly because the atmosphere in our system is extraordinarily complex, and there's so many factors that end up controlling it. And the bottom line is, one possible factor is increasing greenhouse gases. However, that's not the only factor. As I mentioned before, there are many factors. And we shouldn't neglect the fact that historically, going back thousands and thousands of years, there have been many, many dramatic swings in the Earth's climate, all happening way before humans could have possibly influenced it. Now, although the global scale is somewhat uncertain, we do know one thing for sure, and that is humans are absolutely impacting weather and climate on the regional and local level. Most importantly, you hear the buzzword or buzz phrase, urban heat island effect. What that boils down to is, as our cities grow and we have more and more cement and buildings as opposed to grass and trees, the temperatures are rising in the cities versus across the countryside surrounding the cities.
All right, time for some good news. There are lots of ways we can improve our atmosphere. Take this rooftop garden, for example. One of the ways to counteract the urban heat island effect is to plant something cool on top of city buildings. And what could be more cool than a great-looking garden? Not only does the garden not create the heat that a black tar roof does, but it also insulates the building underneath, and the roof lasts twice as long. So, you just have to get used to mowing the roof.
Sometimes you just have to get natural.
Wow, you don't see that every day.
Thanks.
Nice tree.
Planting trees in an urban setting is a great way to let nature do the work. Trees help our atmosphere by reducing ozone and carbon dioxide levels. They also remove chemical and water pollutants, and they help keep the city cool by releasing water vapor and shading our homes and buildings. Besides, they look nice too. Hey, you didn't think I didn't have any? Nah.
If you're like the rest of us 6 billion people on the planet, you probably like a little light at night, maybe some nice air conditioning in the summer, and definitely some heat when it's cold. Well, it all takes power, and that's when it gets tricky.
Every time we turn on a light or we get in our car to drive somewhere, there's a price for that. And in each of those cases, we're using energy. We get energy by burning fossil fuels. And by fossil fuels, I mean not only coal that you have for the generation of electricity, I'm also talking about petroleum products and gasoline that runs our cars. And using these different forms of energy, we wind up creating air pollution. And this air pollution in turn makes people sick. There are many different types of air pollution. There's acid rain, which pollutes our rivers and streams. There's also ground level ozone and particulate matter. In both of these cases, they're localized air pollution problems that we typically have around our bigger cities and towns. We also have greenhouse gases. In all of these different cases, when we're looking at the different sources of air pollution and what different types of air pollution there are, it still comes down to the usual suspects. In all of these cases, as far as all these different types of air pollution, it always comes down to the fact that we're burning fossil fuels, and those are creating these various different types of air pollution.
Well, we've learned a lot about the world around us since coming in from the cold. Some might look up into our polluted skies and wonder whether we've really gotten any smarter. Who knows? In the end, Mother Nature has a funny way of setting things straight, and hopefully we're getting better at understanding our relationship with the weather and our delicate place in this world, which is basically stuck right here between Earth and sky. Later.
It's hot, it's cold, it's perfect, it's terrible. You can plan for it, run from it, dress for it, and even try to predict it. Do whatever you like, but ultimately, you live with it. It's the weather. It's a warm summer breeze and one of the most destructive forces on Earth, all rolled into one. Weather shapes our planet, and it affects our lives in a million ways every single day. It's part of who we are. And for those of you out there that think this weather stuff is cool, let me tell you something. You're right. For the Weather Classroom, I'm Jason, and I'll definitely be seeing you around.